session is an introduction to projects and sample management in Formpak. So the aim of the session is not to cover every possible configuration because projects and tasks can be configured differently for each business. So instead, we're going to focus on common workflows and the concepts that apply across most project templates. So by the end of the session, you should understand what a project is, what a task is, how project templates control the flow, how users are assigned the work, how items are selected and developed, how samples are requested and processed, and how tasks and projects are completed. So projects in Formpak can be used for many types of work, including sample requests, product selection, product development, regulatory reviews, analytical work, documentation requests, and customer feedback, just to name but a few. So terminology. So the key terminology or the key terms that we're going to use throughout the session are project template. So this controls what appears on the project and which tasks are created. A project template can include project attributes, project properties, and task types. A project. So it's the overall container for the work and it holds the customer request, the project details, dates, parties, notes, attachments, applications, sample information, and tasks that need to be completed. And then we've got task type. So this controls the behavior of the task so the system and the users know how the task should be actioned. And then a task. So it's an individual job within the project. So for example, one person may complete an evaluation task, another person may complete a formulation task, and the lab may complete the sample task. So the task represents the work that's required to complete the project. And then we have sample task. So a sample task is used to specify which samples are required. So sample tasks have very specific behavior, which allows users to send their request to the lab and record and sample dispatch information. An item, so hopefully everybody knows what an item is. It's a collective term for a raw material or a formulation. And when we search for products, develop formulation, or request samples, we're working with items. A basket. So a basket's a temporary holding area for items and baskets are really useful because they allow us to move items between different parts of Formpak. For example, find matching items into a task. Suitability checks. So this checks whether an item is suitable for a specific customer, application, dosage, country of use or other customer or business rules. And then we've got ERP system. So it's an integrated business management software system that organises use to automate and manage core daily processes for manufacturing or testing. So there are several common ways projects may be used in Formpak. So the simplest is the sample request. So this is where a customer requests specific sample, perhaps a repeat of something they've already received. There's no evaluation or development work required. The project's added and the sample task is assigned to the lab. The lab prepares the samples and then the project is completed. So another common workflow is recommendation. So this is used when a customer asks for ideas or products that meet their requirements, and the request can be fulfilled using existing products in the library. In this case, a user searches a product library, recommends suitable items, and those items are passed to the sample task. And then we have product development. So this is a third flow and it's used when customers' request requires a new formulation or modification of an existing formulation. So a product developer, such as a perfumer or a flavorist or an analyst, works on the development task, creates or modifies a formulation, and then passes the selected item to the sample task. And then recommendation with product development. So there's also combined recommendation product development flow. And in that case, some products may come from the existing library and others may be newly developed, but both sets of items can then be added to the sample task. And then recommendation with ERP. So some users use projects with an external ERP system, and in that case, the project may start in an ERP system, be sent to Formpak, and then the sample requirements may be sent back to the ERP system for fulfillment. So for today, we're going to use just a generic project flow that includes product selection, product development, and a sample request, and then look at lab processing and completion. So if we just have a look at the project template, so in a project template, the project attributes relate primarily to the information shown on the project header. Anything with yes will appear. And the project properties are fully customizable attributes that you can add directly into the system. And the key purpose is to capture information about the project that it's added. The task types are the jobs which need to be completed to fill the requirements of the project. So let's have a look at task type. So task type, you can specify the behavior and information required when the task is added and allocated. So in product selection task, a user is assigned to review the existing product library and recommend products which are then appropriate for the project. And the answer to this task needs to include a list of items. Okay, and then we've got the inheritance. So task inheritance allows tasks within a project to automatically reflect the changes that are made to key project details, so reducing the need for the manual updates. The blue tick indicates that if a task is in begin state, then the task will inherit the details from the project. And if amendments are made to the selected areas, the task inheritance screen will appear in Manage a Project when any changes are made to the actual project. There's also a permission requirement to customize the inheritance behavior, and the user must have the permission to permit modify which task attributes are updated when managing a project. So without this permission, inheriting will just follow the default rules assigned to each task type. So now we're going to have a look at our support portal. So if we navigate into Formpak, okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with the support portal, but I'll just go through it. So it's new, so it might have changed. Okay, so we've got the search bar at the top here. So if you're looking for a particular area, then you can just type it in. Oops. And it'll bring up all the relevant support articles for you. Okay, and you can do that with any area that you might want assistance with. You can also browse the support articles as well, so it breaks them down into different areas. We've got the training and support videos, so it takes you to a link to our YouTube channel where you can see all the previous recordings of the training sessions. We've got training plans, so specific areas on Formpak that you can use to help, especially managing user permissions. That's quite a complex area, so that's quite useful. And then we've got support requests. So if you can't find the information that you're looking for on the portal, then you can always send us a support request and we can help you with that. Key updates. So these are just changes to the application. Any new functionality will be listed in the key updates. Downloads. So it includes the super useful GHS poster. So that's always helpful when you're adding information from a supplier safety data sheet. And then we've got news articles, and we've also got an overview of training and support as well. Okay, so now we're going to add a new project. So I just first of all make you aware of how you navigate around Formpak. I'm sure you're all aware anyway. You can use the buttons at the top, or you can start typing in the search bar on the left hand side to the area that you want to navigate to. So I'm just going to start typing add a new project and select it. Okay, and then I'm going to select my project template. So the project template, it's just going to be standard project. It's important because it controls the structure of the project. It determines what project information is captured, what project properties are available, and which task types are included. So the next is a project code sequence. So project code sequence controls how the project is generated, so it can be automatic or it can be manual. So for this purpose, I'll just choose automatic. And then primary party. So the primary party is the primary customer or company that the project is for. So I'm just going to pop our primary party in here, which is fussy customer. Oh, there we go. And we can see that the date added has automatically been applied, and then the date required. So the date required is a project when it's targeted for completion. So I'm just going to select the end of the month. Okay, and then we've got TO. So TO is usually default. However, if you're generating it for an affiliate company, you can choose a different TO. So I'm going to save. Okay, and after saving, it takes us into the main project details. So we need to give it a project name. So we're going to go for vanilla and coconut cashmere. Okay, so project name should be a clear description of the request so users can quickly understand what the project is about. So the request is for body lotion. So I'll pop that in there. Okay, and then relating project. So if this new project relates to a previous project, we can search for an earlier project and link it in here. So this is useful when the request is a rework, a repeat, a follow-up, or a connected piece of development. And the next is a project manager. So the project manager is going to be me. Okay, so the project manager is a person responsible for managing the overall project and monitoring the process. It might be the account manager, it might be sales, it's whoever's responsible for managing the project, assigning the tasks, making sure that the work's progressing and also completing the project at the end. And then project modifier. So project modifier can be used to update the project, but not necessarily update any of the tasks. And then we can change the priority if we wanted to, but we're just going to keep it as medium. And we've got the dates added, we've got our primary party details, we could add a contact name if we wanted to, and then the next is the delivery party. So the delivery party is to whom the project results are sent. In many cases, it might be the customer, it might be another site, it might be a contract manufacturer. So ours is going to be a manufacturer, so we're just going to pop that in there. Okay, and then the next thing is the focus items. So focus items are used when a project relates to existing items. For example, if a customer wants a sample to be reworked or wants a repeat based on an existing formulation, we can add the relevant item in here. And then focus applications. So focus applications and dosage that are relevant for the project. So this customer wants body lotion. Oh, that's body wash. And they want the dosage at 1% in the application. Okay, so here we can add target cost and sales price if we wanted to, or alternatively we can add them as properties. It just depends. Some customers prefer to add them as properties, so it's easier for reporting purposes. And then we need the samples required, so the sample quantity. So we're going to add our amounts in. So sample quantity is 100 grams of the actual neat oil, and we want one of those. And then what application is it required in? What is the fragrance or flavour going into? So it's going into body lotion, and we want 1%, and we want one of those as well. Okay, so sample notes. So sample notes are anything to do with the actual samples. So customer requires samples of neat oil and also in application. And then we can pop our properties in. So selling price might be 10, okay, and then cost price might be 5. And then notes. So the notes field is for the customer brief. So whatever the customer requires, you can copy and paste emails into here. It's a huge field that you can populate. So I'm just going to type our customer requirements in here. Customer requires fresh fragrance with notes of coconut and vanilla. Please review existing library and develop new formulation. Mm. There we go. Okay, so it's important, the notes field, because users working on later tasks may use this to understand the brief. So I've added all the information. Now I'm going to click Save. Okay, so I've saved the project and I'm going to manage this project. We're just going to quickly review the tabs so we can see the project tab contains the main project details, the project status, so we can see the user who added it, the date and time, and the parties. So parties can be used to add additional interested parties, and these may be added for regulatory, customer, delivery, or other business reasons. And then we've got the task tab. So the task tab shows us what tasks are in the project, and we can see which tasks need to be assigned and completed to complete the project. So they're all at begin status at present. And then we've got the attachments tab. So attachments tab allows us to add supporting documents. So if the customer has provided an image or a specification or any marketing literature or any other supporting files, then we can add it as an attachment. And attachments can also belong to a project or an individual task. So now we need to assign our tasks. So if I go into the first one and I click Edit, and then I assign it to me, okay, change the status to ready. So we've assigned this task. So product selection would usually be completed by or assigned to the evaluator. And then the next task, product development, I'm going to assign this to me. So this would usually be a flavorist or a perfumer or an analyst. Okay, that one's done. And then the next one, the sample task, would usually be the lab manager. So if we edit and then assign it to me. And save. Okay, so we can see all the statuses have changed to ready to be worked on. So it is possible to configure tasks via task type to be assigned automatically to a user. So for example, a sample task might always be assigned to a lab manager, although it is still possible to change the user on tasks with the relevant permissions. So the first two tasks, product selection and product development, they'll be worked on simultaneously by different users, and it is possible to configure the project templates so tasks cannot be worked on until a previous task has been completed. So if I click Save, and we can see that the task inheritance tab has appeared, which is set on the project. So any changes that then can be inherited by each of these tasks. And if we don't select any inheriting, then it will follow the default rules assigned to each task type. But we're just going to select it all and continue. Okay, so now with a user who's been assigned the product selection task. Okay, so the way that we find our work is search for tasks. So if I start typing, search for task, there we go. And then I select my ready tasks and I click search. And we can see that I've got lots of work to do today. Okay, so the first task that we want to action is product selection. So I'll click on my task, I'll view it, I'll look at any notes, and then I probably want to go and have a look at the project to see what the customer requirements are. Okay, and have a look at the brief. So customer requires a fresh fragrance with notes of coconut and vanilla. Please review the existing library and develop new formulation. Okay, so we know what the customer requirements are. So what we do is we navigate to find matching items because I want to search a product library for existing formulations that may meet the customer request. So I'll go to find matching items, open it in a new tab. Okay, so in Find Matching Items, it's a really useful, powerful search tool for reporting and searching for raw materials and formulations, and it allows users to search using loads of different criteria, including name, costs, hazards, ingredients, regulatory status, suitability, application, classification. And in this example, I'm just going to search for formulations. So I'll untick raw material. Okay, we can see we can also search by costs as well. And if I open the library details up, I'm going to search by character notes. So I'm going to pop my character notes in here. So it's going to be coconut and it's going to be vanilla. Okay, now if I select search, it brings up the items that match. So if I select these items because I want to add them into a basket, so add to basket, and I want to put these items into my task, and I'll just click OK. So baskets are a really useful way because they let us transfer items from one area of Formpak into the other. So now I return to my task. Here it is. Okay, and then I select action my task because I want to give those items as a response. And on the response tab, I select add from basket. Select my items and click OK. So now I can save this and it'll change the status to end to say that these are the items that I think are suitable for the customer brief. And then we click yes. Okay, and the first task is completed. So on each task, you might want to enforce a suitability check, which is performed once the task reaches a certain status. So if any items are not compliant, it will not let the user progress any further unless the non-compliant items are either removed or you have the relevant permission to carry on. So this is a good way to ensure regulatory compliance. Additionally, you could include a regulatory task to check for very specific requirements for the product, which may include, for example, no hazard pictograms on the product label or limit allergen on the packaging. It's entirely up to you. So the first task is now completed. So now we want to move on to the product development task. So it would be the perfumer, the flavorist, or the analysis. Excuse me. And then we'll go back to search for tasks. And if we just open the search back up, search for my ready tasks, and we can see that we've got the product development task here. So I click on it, I view the task, see if there's any relevant notes. I might go in and view the project, and see what the customer requires. So fresh fragrance with notes of coconut and vanilla. Okay, so I go back into my task. And in this task, we can see that this behavior of the task has got a add a formulation button. So if I click add formulation, it takes us into the add a new formulation screen. So I'm going to input my fragrance formulation name. So it's going to be coconut and vanilla cashmere. Okay, item to modify. So if I'm modifying an existing item, I can add that item into items to modify. And this is useful if I want to create a new formulation based on a previous formulation. So the next is item type. So it could be fragrance, flavor, or depending on obviously what work's being done. And then item class is going to be a fragrance formulation. So I'll pop that in. And then item code sequence is going to be automatic. So item code sequence can be the automatic or it can be manual. I know some perfumers and flavorists use the initials and has the next and then the next code sequence. Okay, and we can see that it's brought the application information and also the party information over from the task as well. So if I just click save, and this takes us into the CDT. So the CDT is where users add, view or modify formulation and raw material compositions. And in here, I can search by code, name, CAS number or EC number. So I'm going to start formulating. Okay, so I'm going to choose some vanillin and I want 20% of that. And then maybe some ethyl vanillin, and I want 20% of that, and then some gamma-nonylactone, I want 30% of that, and then delta decalactone, oops, delta decalactone, okay, let's get rid of that extra line, we don't need that. We can just click delete. Okay, so we've added the composition of our formulation. I'll just point out some useful functionality. So in other menus, you do have the option to customize a screen. So you can add additional information. So we can see that we've got the CAS number here and we've got the EC number selected, which is useful when you're formulating. And there's also character class and character notes as well. So it's a good way to customize your screen. And if you save as default, then it'll appear every time you go into the CDT. So now what we're going to do is we're going to save and check it in. So we just click save and check in and OK. And then we can get rid of this tab because we don't need it. Then if we go back into our task and we just hit refresh and go into the items tab, we can see that our item is here, the one that we've just created. So I now want to action my task because I want to give this as a response. So if I go back into the items tab, select my item and then add this item as a response. Okay. And now if we go into our response tab, we can see it's appeared. So this is our formulation that we've given in response to the task. And then we can save this project, this task and end it. So we can see that we've got some notes here. So we've got a notes property. So response properties are required maybe at the end of tasks, and this one has a response property to add notes. So a perfumist or a flavorist may add additional notes like character notes for the formulation. So we're going to add some character notes, so it might be vanilla and coconut notes added. And we're just going to click OK. And then we're going to save it. And then we're going to change it to end to say we've completed our task. Okay. So 2 tasks completed. So again, we go into search for tasks, my ready tasks, and click search. And then the last task is the sample task. So we go into the sample task, we'd view it, we'd have a look at the sample notes, we might have a look at the project to see if there's any additional information on the project. And then once we're in the task, then we would go to edit. Okay. And then we would add the items from a task into this task. So we'll go to add from task. So these items that have been selected or formulated, we'd add these to this task because we want to produce the samples for them. And then we would select the items and then we would apply the application and sample information required to the selected items. So we're going to click apply to selected. Okay, so it applies the sample and application details together. And then we select produce samples. So produce samples is here at the top. Okay, so produce samples sends a request to the sample queue for the lab to process. So this is done by the lab. So they might create additional amounts so they can keep those in the product library. So you might want to add a bit more. Okay, and then apply to selected. Okay, and then request samples. These samples have been sent. So that's been sent to our queue for those samples to be processed. And we just click yes. Okay. Additionally as well, there is a send items list here. So the send items list can be configured to be sent directly to an integrated ERP system to produce the samples automatically by a robot. So there's no human intervention whatsoever there. And then we're going to save this task. Okay, and then the lab flow. So we need to look at the lab side of the sample process. So if we navigate to manage samples produced, okay, so in Manage Samples Produced, the lab manager would select search for samples, they'd look at the queue that they wanted to look at, and then they would look at the requested samples. So what samples have been requested, and then they click search, and it gives them a list of all the samples that have been requested. So then the lab user would go along and he'd highlight these samples and then you'd assign them to someone for them to work on. So assign user, so it would be me. So we'll pop me in there. Okay, so they've been assigned to me. And then if we open the search back up, I would untick requested, assigned to me, and then hit search. Okay, and we can see all the samples that have been requested here. And we can see the ones on the status that are requested, and we can see the ones that have been completed. So I'm going to select the ones that I'm going to work on. So what I'll do is I'll print the formulations for them. So they'll print off into a PDF. So I print all those off and then start work on those. And then I would change the status to say that these are being worked on. So I'd say in progress and I'd say yes. Okay. And then once they've been worked on and they've been completed, what I'd do then is I'd go back in, I'd select in progress, click search, and I'd change them to completed. So the samples are ready to go out the door. So I just need to let them know that they're now complete. And I'd change the status. So they're all completed. So that can then complete the lab stage of things. And then we need to go back into the sample task to complete the sample task. So if I go into my task and I want to action this task, okay. And then on the response tab, we can see that we've got the samples and we need to add the date that they've been sent out. So if I select the date and then I click off it, it gives us the option to apply this date to all the sent items. So we're going to say yes. Okay, and also we've got a response property as well. So the response property is asking us how these samples have been sent out, and they were just sent by standard post. I know some customers have properties for tracking numbers to include tracking numbers on the sample task. So that's quite useful to set up. And then we can just hit save and change the status to end. It's been sent and yes. Okay. So now the samples have been sent, all the tasks have been completed, and we just need to change the status of the project. So if we go into complete our project, so if we have a look for our project, where have I put it? Search for it. Okay, so it's this one. So I want to manage this project, and we can see from the tasks that they're all in completed status. And then I'm just going to change the status to complete and pop a note on there to say samples have been sent. Okay, so that completes our project process. So this gives the business a traceable record of the original customer request, the users involved, the items selected or developed, the samples requested, and the final sample dispatch. And also as well, for managing and monitoring your own or your team's work, we have search for projects and search for tasks. So these are quite helpful for reporting tools. So we just had a little look at search for projects. So custom search is useful. I used it to find my project. So just take the dates out. Okay, we'll have a little look of it. So you can select by project template, you can select by scenario, users and dates. You can also select by the template that we've just been working on. So if we have a look at standard project and hit search, okay, so it gives us all the projects that have used standard project. And if we click print, it brings up a customized column box, so we can add additional attributes if we wanted to, and we could change the format as well. So if I change it to Excel and click print, there we go, it opens an Excel spreadsheet for us. It contains lots of information that you could data sort. Okay, and similarly as well in search for tasks. So if we have a look at that, and then custom search. Okay, so custom search gives us task details, different scenarios. It gives us items specified in tasks, items responded in tasks, users as dates. Okay, so if we search by a particular sample that we want to have a look at, task that we want to have a look, might be sample, and then click search. Again, it gives us the results, and if we click print, we've got the customized column box where we can add additional information, and we can change the format as well if we wanted to. Just have a look at that. Okay, so we can see we've got another Excel spreadsheet there that's useful. Okay, and we can also search for samples as well, so you might be interested in some samples that have been sent out on a particular date or for a particular customer. So if we have a look for our manufacturer, and we click search, it gives us a list of items, and again, you can print and customize it and also change the format as well. Also in manage samples produced, you can print reports as well. So it might be for a specific task, which will be sample task, or a specific task number, and also a specific scope or specific dates that have been sent or what's in progress. So if we have a look at all the in progress, there's nothing in progress at the minute. Or if we have a look at everything that's been completed, there we go. So that's all the samples that have been completed. And again, you can print it, and you can print it to an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. So reporting helps you keep a clear record of which samples were created for which project and which customer and when they were produced. So it brings us to the end of our session now. So just to recap, we've followed a project through the main stages of the workflow. We've added a new project using a project template. We've entered the project details, customer brief, applications, properties, and also attachments. We've assigned tasks to users and made them ready. We've used My Ready Tasks to find assigned work. We've looked at fine matching items and baskets to support product selection. We've created a formulation using the CDT. We requested samples, we looked at managed samples produced, we completed the sample task and closed the project, and we also looked for search for projects, search for tasks, and also looked at reporting on samples as well. So the key point to remember is that projects and tasks are fully configurable. Your system can be set up to have different project templates, task types, properties, status options or approval steps just to suit your business processes and requirements. So projects in Formpak can help teams organise and track their work in one place, can capture customer requirements and assign tasks to different users, manage the samples, monitor the progress, and it improves visibility and consistency across the workflow. So I hope everybody found this super useful.